Hi, this is a tutorial on how to run Stable Diffusion on an Intel Arc graphics card. I currently have an Intel Arc A770 limited edition, which has 16 gigabytes of VRAM. I'd recommend it over the other Intel Arc options just because of the additional VRAM, which will make it easier to run more complex models down the line. However, you can run this with any Intel Arc graphics card. Just keep in mind the performance may not be up to your standards. So, uh, recently I was trying to go through a lot of guides online, trying to install Stable Diffusion in my system, but I was running into issues where the guides were more targeted towards NVIDIA or AMD users. They were outdated, or they were giving me commands that I didn't really know the location that they sourced them from. So when inevitably stuff got updated, there was no way to go back and troubleshoot. So this guide's meant to be easy, straightforward in a video format, and I'll be giving the links to where I'm getting all these commands from down in the description. You'll be able to check the official links and see if they update the page later on. If something doesn't work for this tutorial, it's very likely that Intel has changed some of their commands on their end. So what we're going to be doing is installing Stable Diffusion using Vladmandic, which has some Intel Arc support built into it. And we're going to be installing it using the WSL2 Ubuntu thing in Windows. Now, what that is, it's a little bit of a virtual machine for Windows that allows us to run a Linux environment, but we don't have to install additional partition. We don't need to do anything else. It's just enabling a few easy features in Windows and then working from there. So before we start, I did want to acknowledge that there was one guide that did help with this tutorial a lot, and it'd be a disservice to not acknowledge it. I'd definitely recommend checking out this video by Archive that really goes through a lot of the basics. I'll be taking a few commands from this in the beginning, and I encourage you to check out this video afterwards because he does go through a lot of tips and tricks, optimizations, and also quality of life improvements for your Stable Diffusion installation. All right, so the first step is going to be going to turn on features. So just turn Windows features on or off. And then we're going to be going down. We're going to be checking off virtual machine platform and also Windows subsystem for Linux. So make sure those two are checked, hit OK. You'll have a little bar come up, and then you're going to have to restart your computer and come back. All right, so once you've restarted your computer, all you got to do is open up PowerShell. So just type in the search bar and open up PowerShell. All this is we're going to be pasting in text commands, which command our computer to do different things like download or unpack certain things we use. All right, so what we're going to be doing first is checking to make sure our WSL version is set to version 2. So just use this command. You're just copy and pasting from the description. All right, we're going to be doing checking for updates, making sure that WSL is fully up to date. And what we're going to be doing is installing Ubuntu. So WSL-install Ubuntu. And this will take a couple seconds to install. If you have already been using WSL2 and you want to restart, you can do WSL-unregister Ubuntu, which will delete the Ubuntu installation from your system, and then you can just do a fresh install to make sure. All right, so here all you got to do is create a Linux username, doesn't matter, and then just create a password. All right, then after you've done that, you'll see that the installation was successful, and we can start using our Linux environment. And you can tell you're in our Linux environment by the green text that's on the screen right here. So we're basically in a virtual Linux environment. And commands are going to work like this. So we're going to check to make sure there's no updates or installers that we need to download. You got to enter your password that you just set. Let's try that again. All right. And this might take a couple minutes depending on the speed of your internet connection. But we're basically just installing and unpacking all the updates to our system just so we're all up to date. All right, we're going to be checking that we have Git installed. So just type Git, and if something comes up like this, we have Git. We're also going to be checking we have Python 3. So Python 3, you'll see that this opens up and we can just exit out of it like this. So we know we have Python installed. And next up, we're going to be installing the Python virtual environment. So use this. And then we're going to be installing pip. So use the next command. And then we'll be using this to install libgl1. And then we're going to be cloning the repository that we're going to be using for this thing. So what we're going to be using is the Vladmandic automatic GitHub repository to run Stable Diffusion in a UI environment. So what we're going to be doing is just copy and paste you can also get it directly from the GitHub, but git clone and the URL. So this will basically copy all the files from the GitHub onto our system. And we can actually view these files if we want to. So in Linux, you can do ls to check it's kind of like a file viewer. And then we can also go into that folder using cd automatic. And then we can list out what's installed in that thing. And then we can also just do cd to go back to our base home directory. All right, so first off, what we're going to need to do is install OpenAPI. So this is where the specific Intel specific stuff goes into play. So we're going to be checking our Linux version, unless this is the very, very far future in like a year or so, your Linux version is going to be less than 23.04 installed on this virtual machine. And that means we actually have to do a lot of manual work to install the graphics drivers that are required for this installation. In the future, if you're above 23.04, they should be installed automatically, but right now we're going to have to do it manually. So what we're going to do is copy and paste this in like so. And just a heads up, if you want to check these commands out, just look at the link in the description. They may have updated since I did this tutorial. All right, so we're going to do this again with another command. All right, and then we actually have to reboot the system. So just do sudo reboot, and we'll be kicked back to the main screen. Close PowerShell, and then reopen it like that. And then we're going to WSL to get back into WSL. This will boot back up our Linux machine, and we can just cd back to the home directory like that. All right, and then we just continue installing. So we're going to install the drivers. All right, and then install this. All right, and then we're going to be checking for the runtime to make sure it's installed on the system. This probably isn't needed, but just to double check, it's in the Intel docs. So, yep, it's all set. And then we're going to be checking our groups. So they want us to make sure that we're part of the render group on our Linux machine. And you can see listed out, I'm not in the render group. There's no render group under my user. So just if that is the case, just copy this command over, which will add you to the new group render. And then you can run the previous command again. Remember, you can just use your arrow keys to go back. For some reason, it didn't want to do that properly, but That's okay. And other times you can do that. And then you can check to see that I am added to the render group. All right. And then it also, Intel says or recommends to disable hang checks for GPU intensive tasks that last for more than a couple minutes. So what we're going to be doing is going directly to where we're going to need to edit our grub file, which actually isn't installed normally in a WSL installation. So we're going to reinstall grub, hit yes to install it. All right. And then we're going to navigate to our etc/default folder. So cd e/ect/default, like that. And now we're in the default folder. You can check to make sure that the grub is in here. And what we're going to do is sudo nano grub. All right. So this is basically a text editor within the console. Works just like Notepad if you've ever used it. And what we're going to be doing is just copying this, what's in the description, into this section right here. So just arrow down with your cursor, and then we're going to copy it directly into here. Now, all you got to do is we're going to write it out with Control O, hit Enter, and then we're going to exit with Control X. And just like that, you've edited maybe your first Ubuntu file or something like that. All right, and then all you got to do is sudo, we're going to go back to our home directory, sudo update.grub, and then everything's been updated when we just reboot the system again, just to make sure it's taken effect. So just a quick note that after modifying the grub file, your WSL installation becomes a little unstable for some reason, so I'd recommend rebooting now and then coming back to PowerShell. Otherwise, you might get a catastrophic failure option, or for some reason, stuff just won't connect and commands won't work. I'm not sure why, but yeah, just restart the system, and then we're back to where we are now. Back in PowerShell, do WSL, WSL will start, and go back to our home directory here. All right, so now it's time to start installing One API. We've done all the prerequisites such as the graphics drivers and disabling hang check and adding us to the render group, etc., etc. So it's going to be a new URL that I'm getting these commands from, so feel free to take a look at it in the description, see if anything's been updated. All right, so this may take a while. I'm using the offline installer. There's an option for an offline installer on One API. For some reason, the online installer doesn't work. So the offline installer basically downloads everything all at once in this big package, and then you can choose and pick and install it all right there instead of relying on an internet connection down the line. You can try either one. I just found that the offline version was more fail-safe and didn't have the same issues the online installer did. So yeah, and there might be different versions of this in the future, so just check the link, and there may be a new version of One API and a new installer to download. However, I don't know, maybe it'll break something in the future, so if the new version doesn't work, just go back to the old one I have in this tutorial because I know it works. Our thing. So basically when you copy and paste this in, it's going to open up a GUI interface. I said it's interface twice, whatever. So just go through the base toolkit installer like this. I accept the terms of license agreement. You don't need to change anything. Just continue with the recommended installation. There's going to be a bunch of these warnings if a package is not installed. They're not really important for what we're doing, so feel free to do whatever you want if you want to, but there's no reason to worry about them because we're not going to be doing some of the graphical interface stuff they're talking about. It doesn't matter, whatever. And then you're just going to have to wait for all of these elements to install. All right, and so when it's done, just hit the finish, and then we'll just go back to PowerShell. All right, so we've installed all the prerequisites that we need for Vladmandic. Now it's time to install the actual Stable Diffusion interface and everything that comes with it. So what we're going to do is just make sure you're in the home directory, so just cd, and then we're going to do cd automatic, which will bring us to the automatic folder. We can do ls to list everything that's there, and we're going to be using this command, so one sec. We're going to be using this command. It's important to add the thing on the end, which is -- use IPEX, which will enable us to force it to use one API. And if you don't use this, it'll basically start using your CPU, which, I mean, it'll still work, but it won't nearly be as fast, and you'll start running into memory issues pretty fast. So run that command. Should start going through. And if you get to this point, you should be okay. The issue is that this installer is gonna take about an hour or so. I think I timed it on the first install and it was about an hour. Sometimes it'll go through and it won't look like it's doing anything. Like you'll open up your task manager and nothing will be happening, but it is still installing. It's just doing it very slowly. I'm not sure why it does it like this. Uh, if it's frozen for like more than 10 minutes, you can always use the keyboard command when you're in PowerShell to just Control C, and that'll break it, and then you can just rerun the command I just ran and try and restart the installation. It'll start from where you left off, so it's not like you're going to lose progress by doing this. Just keep in mind it's going to take a while. Just don't get too impatient. It's going to take an hour. You might just want to leave your computer while this is running. All right, so it's a little under an hour later, and we're finally at the screen that allows us to install or download the Stable Diffusion model. Now, I mean, of course, click yes, but the issue I've run into multiple times for some reason is that it doesn't want to download. Like, you can open up your task manager and you can check the network tab, and you'll see that there's just absolutely nothing getting downloaded this entire time. Not quite sure what the issue is. So what I'd recommend doing is just control clicking on this link, and it'll actually allow you to manually download the file into your downloads folder. And then what you just do here is control C. As I told you, that interrupts the program and brings us right back to the console. And then I'll just show you what you need to do in File Explorer. So if you go into File Explorer and you scroll all the way down to the bottom here, you'll actually see there's a Linux tab. And if you click that, you'll be able to go into your Ubuntu folder. And this is exactly what's being downloaded and used in the Linux virtual machine we're using. We can just access the files and edit the files really easily in File Explorer. So what we're going to be doing is going to Ubuntu. We're going to be going to Home. Your user is going to be different for you. Automatic, models, Stable Diffusion, and then in this folder you just drag and drop the model that you downloaded. So for example, I just downloaded this, and then for example, from the link I just downloaded, here's the file. It's the v1-5 pruned EMA only safety tensors. Just drop that file in there, and we're going to go back to PowerShell really quick. All right, just scroll all the way down, and we're going to use the arrow keys to rerun the last command, which was this. And you can see that I think it'll detect the file in File Explorer. Yep, it looks like it detected it. All right, now we're all set. Well, almost all set. So you'll see here that this little link up here is what we want to actually go to. So just control click that link and it'll just pop up in your default browser, such as Google Chrome. And I'll just show you on my end what it looks like. So yeah, here's our stable diffusion model thing. What we're going to do is we can just go over to our prompt and you can put some negative prompts in, such as cartoon, blurry, pixelated, and you can set the size that the image is generating, what you're using, etc., and then generate. And well, in the meantime, you can actually just check your performance in Task Manager and make sure that it's your graphics card that's getting used. And see over on the copy side over here, you can see it immediately started popping up. And yeah, if we put an image in new tab, and you can see we've fully generated this slightly pixelated image because it's only 512 by 512, but it was using the GPU and it's fully working. Some of the other features are working, I believe. I tried process image and it worked okay. From image, I was running into some errors. Probably play around with that. But overall, the basic image generation looks pretty good, and you can own or run your own models if you want to using some other guides. All right, so that's the end of the tutorial for me. I recommend checking out the rest of Archive's tutorial where he goes into some really useful things such as setting the WSL config file, which allows you to change the memory and swap size to make sure your model doesn't crash. He also goes into detail about mapping certain paths to your desktop, for example, so you can store all your models on your desktop or whatever folder you want, and they'll instantly get pulled into your Ubuntu installation whenever you want. So it's just an easier way of keeping track of everything. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. Leave a comment if there's anything you think can improve this tutorial or if there's anything that's changed. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.